All right. Apparently, I was an idiot and didn't have the bumper music running, and that was just dead air time. Isn't that cool?
Uh, it happens.
Oh,
Definitely happens.
it's one of those days. It's one of those weeks.
Yeah, it just like I was saying, it freaking froze up totally on me when I was in the middle of all this and I was trying to reboot the computer and get into Skype at the same time. And I'm
Yeah,
still trying to get Chrome to run while we're doing this.
everything just gets slower and slower. It's weird. Hey, everybody, it's Real Monsters. Welcome. I'm SK Barrett, your host, and joining me is the tap dancing Wes Hobrick.
Yeah, tap dancing with computer errors at the moment, but
Jazz
yep.
hands.
Yeah, no corona fingers, luckily.
All right, we
Uh,
got a weird one today, don't we?
yeah,
Well,
we definitely
unique.
do.
I don't weird, maybe not, but definitely pretty one of a kind.
Yeah, absolutely. Which get into the little bit of news that I had.
Sure.
Um I did the first item on there, I don't know if people had heard about the NFL's Earl Thomas being held at gunpoint by his wife.
I did hear about this, and he, former Seahawk, and he played a long time here in Seattle and left a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of fans with the way he departed and his attitude.
Wow.
Um, Still, it doesn't mean he should have a gun put to his head by a crazy woman.
Yeah, it was kind of weird because they both like came out after it saying that, oh, that's not what happened and what have you. I guess kind of Tiger Woodsing the situation, as it were.
Mm.
But um yeah, and then the Ahmaud Arbery case keeps getting more interesting.
Oh, we lost West there for a second. He keeps coming and
Can you
going.
hear me?
Sometimes,
Let's say I can hear you.
yeah, every now
Um
and then I get the sonar ping.
uh yeah, but the Arbery case is getting
Yep.
more and more interesting with it coming out that the accused had investigated Mr. Arbery with the local DA's office,
Why?
and the two it was in 2012 for like a petty weapon charge, if I remember correctly.
Hmm.
Um, and the two officers who actually showed up in February, the day that he was shot,
Yeah.
said that they had more than enough probable cause to arrest those guys that day. But the current DA told them to stand down. So,
Oopsie. That's probably not going to go well for the DA.
and she's stepped down since then, but that whole thing just reeks of cronyism.
Oh
I think,
yeah.
look
It's
at it.
yeah. It's astonishing, really. And I mean, and
Yeah.
it's it. I don't
Quite
know.
sad
I don't know
too.
what these guys are going to do for a defense because it's on video. It's pretty clear.
And out
And
with some big claims today that these guys are being railroaded, but
uh, hold on a second. What are we going to do here? get it back.
Um, but
Okay,
yeah, I wonder if we want to just get right into what
let,
we had on
let's do it.
Panzram. Um, so this guy, he's very interesting for several reasons, but probably the most important one, the biggest reason,
Yeah.
is that the insights that we have about him are in his own words. Um, and just to start off on his life with all of that, he was born actually on my birthday, um, about 94 years before I was born, June 28, 1892, in a small town in Minnesota, East Grand. Um, and from there, the papers that we have that are still extant of him
Hmm.
are about 40,000 words, interestingly enough. And being 1992, the prison system, when he was in it, he was about 15 when he was first incarcerated.
Okay.
They didn't allow for things like pencil and paper in there. They didn't
Really?
want inmates to, yeah, to talk about their treatment, basically.
Well,
And
yeah. No, they wouldn't, would they?
no, no. But the way that it started, the way that we got the 40,000 words from him was Panzram was pinched for a burglary charge in Washington, D.C. around 1928. And there was a kindly guard in there by the name of Henry Lesser. And he befriended Panzram basically. And from there, he started giving him paper and pencils. Panzram would write about 10 pages and then leave it on the tray for his cell where they would put the meals they would bring into him.
Okay.
And Lesser would smuggle it out. Um, and all of that information was collected sometime after that, around the time of Lesser's death in 1983 by SDSU, San Diego State. So they have it all preserved in their archive.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he was born, like I said, on June 28th, my birthday, in East Grand Forks, Minnesota. He had six other siblings. And depending upon who you look at with this, it's kind of weird because certain experts say that he had a very easy family life, or, very regular, I guess would be
Yeah.
a better word. he wasn't abused by his family, but they were very poor. And then you have others who say that no, it was hell on earth where he
Really?
was. Yeah.
You don't often get
So-
that kind of an extreme.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. And there's a lot of facts with Panzram that may be embellished and may not be, depending upon who you ask about it. But he was also very, very candid in how he talked.
Hmm.
And that's why most of what I have here are quotes from him, in fact. Just to start it off, one of them was, I
Oh,
have no conscience.
I have
Uh,
some of these quotes that you sent me.
oh, yeah. Yeah, keep in mind, I'm not looking at the YouTube right now
That's
because
okay.
apparently I can't with this stupid computer. But yeah, we can show people with that. If you look at them, they're very, very nihilistic. You know, Panzram was almost like if Friedrich Nietzsche and John Wayne had a kid, it would be
Wow,
Karl Panzram.
that's a that's a crazy combination.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just a few. I have no conscience. I hate the whole damn human race, including myself. Uh, I don't believe in God, man, nor devil. So,
Hmm.
um, around that time in DC, he was arrested, oddly enough, on a relatively minor burglary charge. Um, and he just, when they got him in there, he started talking about these 21, 22 other murders that he committed. And
Really?
nobody, yeah,
He just
ain't no
started
tell.
volunteering.
Yeah, he just started chatting with these policemen, and more came out. Um, mm, like some of the headlines too with that was Seaman, SEA, all
Hmm.
you dirty minded people, tells of murders and robberies in amazing confession made to police. Um, which at that time, Lesser, the guard who befriended him, was 25, and he was what you could call, green and idealistic at that time.
Sure.
And really, the curve for that, though, like we were saying, is kind of huge because idealistic was the label that was applied to him, basically thinking that, hey, people like Panzram deserve treatment as human beings
Yeah.
and not to be, brutally tortured, which we'll definitely get to. But he said upon first meeting Panzram that he was husky and he walked with a limp. Um, and the reason he even went down there to that cell block was he heard of a quote very interesting inmate in the South Wing. So he literally just walked past his cell and started a conversation. And he befriended him from there, getting him supplies like cigarettes and the like in there. And Panzram, he starts to turn to Lesser and basically bear the soullessness in the void that was inside him.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, and it
So
was
so
against. Mhm.
what okay. So what was the story that he told?
That I'm just looking for my notes for the best place to start there.
Yeah.
He quite often through this would make the point that to him it wasn't his responsibility for his behavior
Oh, no. Why would it be?
made him this way. Yeah. I mean, that's a rather common thing with psychopaths, though, I think. Deflecting blame, as
Right.
it were.
Well, uh, a lot of people share that trait.
Yeah, this is true.
Um, most
It's
criminals,
very true.
a lot of addicts,
Um,
yeah, a lot of people uh, really want to avoid personal responsibility.
yep. Oh, absolutely, they do. And you know, a bit more backstory before we get into that too. The Colonel Peak, who was basically the warden of the jail, warned all his guards to, quote, be extra careful around this very dangerous man who had a penchant for prison breaks, which was another thing we'll get into. He was called by some the criminal Houdini. He was that good at breaking out of prison. In
Really?
fact, there was a story about him breaking in to a prison to help another inmate out, but they caught him with that one. So yeah, but they ended up finding some of the bars loose on Panzram's cell in the DC jail. And so what they did then, they took him to the jail's basement, strapped him to another iron door, and literally whipped him with a bullwhip.
Wow.
Oh yeah, they get much more creative with the torture too. Um, and they forced him off the ground at some distance and kept him that way for the night too. And the second night when they were going to do that, he put up a fight on the way there because he knew basically what they were going to do.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so they beat him mercilessly with clubs and fists and then drug him to the basement. Um, which that jail also had been used to torture slaves about a century before around DC. Um, so Lesser, when all this started, he said, quote, I felt he had a story to tell. I encouraged him to write his autobiography. And Panzram says, I can't. I didn't finish sixth grade.
Wow.
And Lesser, it took 2 weeks of encouragement, but he did it. So he starts smuggling in what we were talking about there. Um, Panzram starts November 4th, 1928. And probably one of the more telling at the beginning of it, if after reading what I write, your faith in human nature isn't all destroyed, then it never will be.
Hmm.
Um,
So he really
yeah,
feels like he has experienced the the full extent of the worst of human behavior.
he really does. And to some degree, he has too, which we'll get to here in a minute. But, you know, I was born on a small farm in Minnesota, parents of German descent, hardworking, ignorant, and poor people. And he said going in there too, I was a normal human being, five brothers, one sister. And those, his siblings, for the most part, all seemed to turn out okay uh, after that life, besides the two that died when they were young.
Yeah, that was quite common.
Hmm. And there's another theory there with Panzram that he might have had brain damage with all of that too. He tells of a operation that he had to have on his left ear. And they literally did this on the family's kitchen table in their farmhouse.
Wow.
So apparently, he was experiencing intense pain and pressure in it. So, the little bit of research that I did there, I narrowed it down to the operation being a mastoidectomy that he likely had,
Okay.
which that's the bone
Yeah.
right below your ear. I
Right.
would assume, I'm not totally sure how they would have done it, but maybe shaved it down. Um,
Yeah. Well, ectomy means removal, so
mhm,
they took some part of it out then, if that's the case. Um,
they did,
and how
and
old was he?
he was about 8 when that happened.
Man,
Yeah, likely no anesthesia,
right?
but I asked a doctor friend of mine about that to see if it was possible that he could have gotten brain damage from that operation. And he said no, actually. Um, Not even considering that they did it on the table and with crude tools, most likely. So,
Well, yeah, not brain damage, but you know, trauma for sure.
yeah, yeah, I mean, psychological trauma, definitely.
Yeah,
Maybe the
because
physiological too.
because you know, that's a lot of pain for a kid,
Oh,
for
yeah.
anybody. But you know, um, 8 years old, that's right in that sweet spot of the um, formative years for the neurology in the brain, and so you know those
Hmm.
kinds of well, every kind of circuit in the brain gets myelinated really quickly and easily.
Hmm.
Um, so
Oh,
that
oh,
would have
yeah,
definitely been something that stuck with him.
absolutely. And the doctor speculated that he might have had a condition called Meniere's disease
Oh, I don't
that
know
causes that.
what
Um,
the bone degeneration.
the pain and the pressure
Okay.
in the ear.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
he said that the mastoidectomy was a pretty common treatment for that. So, but yeah, and he had those pre-existing issues, and he also had what a lot of the experts call a sort of free-floating anger, and he was a very reactive and very vengeful guy, kind of from early on. Um, and shortly after the operation, he broke into a neighbor's house and, quote, stole those things which I thought had the most value. And this included a, quote, great big pistol. Um, it's a jealous and resentful kid,
Yeah.
really, when you get down to it. And not long after that, he says, I walked to the railroad yards and caught a freight train going west, where I intended to be a cowboy and shoot Indians. I was caught. Um, I was caught, brought back home, beaten half to death, and sent to jail. And this is where
Jeez.
the Minnesota State Training School at Red Wing comes in.
Oh
We
yeah.
actually have
We
a
ha
picture of that.
coming right up.
Yep, I think it's noted at the top of the picture.
Yep.
It's its color. Yep. Um, and he says, right there and then, I began to learn about man's inhumanity to man. And looking at the institution's records, they say that the relationship with parents was, quote, quarrelsome. And that was the main reason he was there.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah,
I
it's
mean,
being a pretty.
isn't that to this day, you know, that's the largely the purpose of military school is to send, you know, argue, you know, what is it, defiant young boys off to be dealt with by other people.
Oh, absolutely. And the purpose of this one was also churning out obedient workers to staff, the factories
Ah, yeah.
and in Minnesota, the agriculture too. They did. They generally had a routine of school half a day and work half a day, and then quote the rest of the time. We learned how to love Jesus and be good boys.
Well, he didn't learn that.
No, he kind of learned to hate that. Um, there's a rather funny quote that he had to the ministers at his execution that we'll get to too. Um, so there's quite a lot of that. I mean, the guy's got bravado, but yeah, in his time there, over about 2 years, he had 27 demerit slips, and for things like stealing food, talking back to the teachers, being disorderly, whispering,
That's
calling a boy a quote snitch, putting sugar.
that's only one a month. That's not bad, is it?
Well, they get into some of these.
I mean,
Putting sugar in his pocket was one. Um, Talking loud. Quote, he is impudent all the time. Quote, doing very poor work. Disobedience, breaking two dishes, using bad language, kicking another boy, throwing a piece of crayon at another boy, throwing food, stealing butter, and playing in school.
okay, so these are really not all that bad of things. I mean,
No,
he wasn't like stabbing people or anything like that, or getting in fights even.
no, no, not at all.
I mean, this
But
is just, I don't, this is just the kind of shit that boys do. I mean, granted, you want to teach them to not do
and
that.
I
I'm not
they did not
excusing that,
realize that they were making a monster.
right? Well, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what you do want to learn, try to civilize young boys, or they will become monsters, even if they're not sociopaths. So I'm not excusing the behavior. I'm just saying it's common. I mean, this is
Oh
like
yeah.
the natural state of a boy that
Oh,
you,
absolutely.
but how you train it out of a boy makes all the difference.
Oh yeah, definitely. And from looking at it with the school, they tended to be rather sadistic. They also sexually abused a lot of the boys too.
Mm.
And Panzram says off by trying to beat the Christian religion into me. The more they beat and whipped me, the more I hated their damned religion. Um,
Shock.
and yeah, one would
Who
think
could
they
have
would get
possibly seen that coming?
that, but
Holy shit.
they several punishment methods most often used. The big one was what was called the paint shop, so called because there they would paint our bodies black and blue. And from my understanding, that's also where a lot of the sex abuse went on.
Mm.
So, all of this, it just sort of intensifies his feelings of abandonment, too. He says, I began to hate those who abused me. And then I began to think I would have my revenge as often as I could injure someone else.
That's a it's it's a curious uh, it's like uh, people who are abused tend to take one of two
Hmm.
tacks. And one is I'm going to make sure this never happens again to me or anybody I care for. The other is I want to hurt other people. And there's
Hmm.
and I don't I understand if you wanted revenge on abusers, that would
Hmm.
make some sense to me, but it's not limited to abusers. They just want to hurt somebody. They want to be
Oh, yeah.
the ones in control, in power, and inflict harm on other people as
Oh, absolutely.
some kind of justification.
He actually touched another sentence. If I couldn't injure those who injured me, then I'd injure someone else.
Yeah,
Uh,
why?
yeah,
See,
that's a great question.
I don't quite get that, but I know that it's common. I
Hmm.
mean, that's exactly how abuse continues, is because of the ones who carry that attitude.
Hmm. Oh yeah. And it's just you can see the cycle here so clearly with him, and it only gets worse too.
Hmm.
But he tried escaping several times. Um, he was sent to the laundry once a week for dining room limit. He says one cold winter day, um, oh, I was just having a bit of trouble reading my writing. Oh, it went down on the next line. Duh. I was caught, brought back, and beaten near to death. And this was after they left him out, literally soaking wet in the snow
Wow.
outside the night. So it's I don't know. I mean, it's just intense, the step that he went through.
That's yeah, that's not right by any measure. I mean, that's criminal
Oh
today.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I would think it would have been back then too.
Quite
But
possibly, if anybody had, known about it or believed him.
oh yeah. And he proceeded to burn down the building housing the paint shop in 1905. So,
Okay, you know, I'm kind of with him on that actually.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I am too. And after 2 years there, quote, I was pronounced by the parole board to be a nice, clean boy of good morals.
Mm.
Um, I had been taught by the Christians how to be a hypocrite.
Oh,
I had learned,
ouch.
yeah,
Burn.
I had learned more about stealing, lying, hating, barring, and killing from there than anywhere else. Just
Wow.
having trouble with my writing again. Damn, I should have typed that part. But yeah, he also says, I'd fully decided when I left there just how I would live my life. He ends up
So,
resuming his
so
journey to the West.
let's just pause for a moment and say sometimes murderers are made.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
there's really not much of an indication that he had sociopathic tendencies before going to the military school. I mean, he might have been, obstinate and argumentative and defiant and that kind of stuff, but he wasn't out there,
Hmm.
doing a lot of really bad shit before he got sent to the military school.
No, he really wasn't. And he absolutely wasn't. And he made another point to that effect. Um, I don't have the exact quote on this page, but it was something to the effect of, had I been taught better, this wouldn't have happened. And 22 people wouldn't have died. But um, he soon, like I said, hopped that freight train again and went back out west. And pretty quickly, when he got on there, he claimed he was gang raped by four hobos.
Hmm.
He was about 13 when
Yeah,
that happened.
that's not hard to believe, is it?
No, not at all. Um, what they couldn't get by moral persuasion, they proceeded to get by force, is what he says. And after that experience, he said, I came out a sicker but wiser boy. I learned to look with suspicion and hatred on everybody.
Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah. And getting into the Nietzschean part of all this, he says, force and might make right. Um, but what's really strange there, right after he says that in his writing, He goes on to say, perhaps things shouldn't be that way, but that's the way they are.
Hmm.
And that's a degree of introspection you don't often see in a psychopath.
Well, that's, you know, I, I'm kind of thinking psychopath might not be the right word for it. Um, I mean,
Hmm.
because I don't think he was, I honestly, I believe that serial killers are typically a combination of nature and nurture. Um, but
Hmm.
usually the nature part is, it's born into them. There's a deficit of neurons in the hippocampus, I believe it is, um,
Hmm.
which you know prevents them from forming personal relationships. You know,
Hmm.
feeling connected to people.
Oh,
But we don't
absolutely.
see that here. You know, uh, he might have been brain injured during some of those beatings for sure. Um,
That's true too. I
which
hadn't
would,
thought of that.
yeah, which could have precipitated, his deciding to be a murderer.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. But oh yeah, one thing I don't think I mentioned with the military school.
Oh yeah.
It's actually located in the same town that makes Red Wing shoes in Minnesota.
Oh. So that's why it was called the Red Wing School.
Yep, but
I used to have Red Wing shoes as a kid. Used to go to the Red Wing shoe dealer.
yeah, I think I did too. We had one right on the main drag in town. I'm not sure if they're still open, but
Yeah.
yeah. After all of this, he focuses his anger outward, and he says, "I learned to love whiskey and sodomy." Um, and face it, women just weren't riding the rails.
No.
So, um, he goes on to say, "I was so busy committing sodomy, I didn't have time to follow Jesus."
He's kind of funny, I
Uh,
gotta say.
oh, he is. His bluntness about a lot of stuff. But at age 14, he's at a bar in Helena, Montana, when an army recruiter comes in and gives a speech, right?
Yeah.
So he joins up at Fort Harrison, the 6th Regiment A Company. And of course, again, the regimentation of that sort of life did not fit well with his personality.
Right.
And he was in only a few months when he stole some property, a radio, from the supply house and got 3 years at Fort Leavenworth.
Oops.
Uh, yeah. And his punishment during this was literally to be shackled to a 50-pound iron ball for 6 months.
An iron ball,
Yeah,
like in the
literally.
cartoons.
Yeah, yep.
So that was
And
based on a real thing.
oh, yeah. And with that ball, he had to load it, an 18-pound hammer, a pick, a shovel, and a 6-foot iron crowbar into a wheelbarrow and, quote, march behind the line of cons 3 miles out to the rock quarry and there work for 8.5 hours in the hot Kansas sun, busting big rocks. So he's on a chain gang,
Yeah.
basically.
He's at the military version of Planet Fitness, though.
Yeah, this is true.
They're making him really strong, really physically tough.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where he says, I was the spirit of meanness personified. Um, at the time, I was not so that I hated myself. I only hated everybody else. Um, and there's the quote actually. I could have been taught properly, and if I had been, I feel sure I would have led a far different life than I have done. Some of the blame is yours for not making it your business to see to it that such conditions should not exist among your fellow man. So that was the one.
I agree. I agree with that partially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but here's the thing. Um, Bad shit happens to everybody to some degree or another, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not what's what separates people is how they react to it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you get the people who just get angry and they dwell on that, and the others who maybe use it for something constructive.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. Panzram, he definitely externalized that anger. Um, and every he was tortured in these prisons by every kind of abuse and punishment, his words, that could be devised. He was often in solitary confinement, which itself can be
Mm.
a form of torture, I think.
It really is.
Hmm.
Is this
He
where
said,
that tub thing happened?
it actually is. That was a device called the hummingbird. I was just looking for the section I have on that. Oh, there it is. First, what they would do is put the convict in a steel bathtub holding a sponge, and the sponge was in turn wired to a battery. Um, let's see, Panzram was then wet down and brutally shocked, usually for about 2 to 3 minutes at a time, is how they would do it. And he
Jesus.
described the feeling of it as, quote, millions of red hot needles sticking in. They had another method with all of that that they called the snorting pole. I don't think I put that one in there,
Mm-mm.
but it's essentially being scourged at the pillar. They would chain you to, a pillar
Okay.
and then take a bullwhip over you. And they called it the snorting pole because, guys would start to moan and they would snort
Oh yeah.
while being whipped. Um, some of Panzram's other observations are interesting too. He says if you think that you can stop crime by catching us, locking us up, punishing us by brutal treatment, hanging or electrocuting us, sterilizing or castrating us, then you are a fool for thinking that way. That only makes bad matters worse.
Yeah. I think he was pretty spot on with that. Um,
Mhm.
the evidence just keeps piling up that um, uh, brutal methods of confinement do not reform people. I mean, as long as that person is incarcerated, they personally are not committing any crimes, but they rarely are um, refurbished when they get out.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. We need new treatments for a lot of classes of crime. I think drugs being the biggest one that we need that for.
Yeah. Well, and also the types of individuals that are often drawn to the um, corrections work are often ill-suited to
Yeah.
um, helping inmates, and they don't even think that's their job. A lot of them, they think, it's an us. They kind of see it as a war, and therefore it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and quite a few of them are actually trained that way. They call it the hero cop syndrome,
Yeah.
in the police and corrections worlds. But yeah, he started in May 1918. He had his second escape from the state prison at Salem, Oregon. And he says with that one, I fired and fought till my gun was empty of bullets and I was empty of courage.
Mm.
Um, yeah, the first one wasn't so eventful. He just stole a white uniform and walked out. But he did have a pretty remarkable ability to escape. I mean, he was called the Houdini of outlaws. Um, and he also had quite the long running list of aliases. He had about 15 of them that he would operate, off on as needed. But
Yeah, we got the picture of his Rhodes mugshot.
yep. And I think we have the Jeff Baldwin too, but maybe not.
No, I don't remember seeing that one.
But the second Salem prison break was under the name John O'Leary. And, that one was quite interesting because it was there that he took out a seaman's papers and started sailing. He went to South America, Europe, and Africa. And what was most interesting during this 5 year period for him from 1918 to 23,
Yeah.
he robbed a house in New Haven, Connecticut, and he ended up getting away with $40,000 in jewelry, cash, and Liberty bonds, and a Colt 1911 pistol. And want to guess who that house belonged to?
Nope.
The ex president of the United States, William Howard Taft.
This guy.
Yep. Um, yeah, so he robbed Taft of all of that. And he ended up actually buying a yacht with the $40,000. He called it the Akista.
Well,
And then,
how did he manage to not get away then?
um, well,
I mean,
he,
you got a boat and you've got seaman's papers, which means you know how to operate a boat probably. Um,
oh,
you should
I
be,
mean,
you should be out of there.
well, we've got about 8 years before he's caught.
Oh,
So,
okay. So he did get away for a while.
yeah, Taft, he was in New Haven, Connecticut at that time because he was teaching law at Yale. But yeah, Panzram, he bought a yacht with that money, and he ended up hiring about 10 different sailors to work on it.
Okay.
And his MO with this, he would hire them, he would rob them, he would rape them, and then he would shoot them with Taft's gun
Wow. And then like toss him overboard or something.
in the Long Island Sound. And
Why
so there
go
were about 10.
you got a goddamn boat. Go way out there and toss them over
Oh, yeah.
where
I
they
mean,
were
one
not
would think so.
when they're not going to be found.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he didn't with these, but shortly after that, he got a job with the Sinclair Oil Company and set sail on a different vessel than the Akista for Africa. Um, Before that, he assaults and murders a small boy when he's there. He gets a ticket on the Belgian steamer down the coast for Lobito Bay, which is modern day Angola. And he hired a canoe and 6 men. And what he did with them was he shot each of them 2 times, once in the back, once in the head, and then dumped them over the boat for the crocodiles.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And he's one brutal son of a bitch.
Man,
Um,
he didn't like paying his crew.
no, not at all. But he soon after sailed back. I forgot the picture. We
Oh yeah.
actually have a picture from the Saturday Evening Post of January 1924, where Panzram claims that the white guy in that picture is him. So we have that, and then we
Yep.
have it blown up.
It's up now.
Nobody knows for certain, but it might
Yeah,
be.
back to him, but um, could be.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. But yeah, he ends up making his way back to the States by way of Panama, where he burned down an oil rig. Uh,
Jesus.
yeah,
I mean, this guy just you just don't know what
yeah.
he's gonna do next.
No, not at all. Um, let's see. When he gets back, he says at Salem, Massachusetts, I murdered an 11 or 12-year-old boy by beating his brains in with a rock.
Wow.
Um, let's see. He next robs a man who tries to buy the Akista and shoots him twice.
Jeez.
And then he raped and murdered another boy in New Haven. Um, and yeah, and it goes on like that for a little bit. But um, there's one expert who said that the patterns of his behavior are there mostly to make him look like a big bad guy.
Well, it kind of works.
Yeah. Oh,
Well, I mean,
absolutely.
'cause he is a big bad guy.
Hmm. And he is, definitely he is. But there's other historians that say that no, he really wasn't that much of a liar. Um, the only verifiable instance that they could point out was when Panzram claimed to have started a fire at the Salem prison that he said claimed about $100,000 in property damage,
Yeah.
but the total was only about 25.
Oh, that's
Um,
okay. So that's a small, really, in the scheme of things, that's a small exaggeration.
Essentially, yeah. And that, like I said, is all that that historian could find
Wow.
when he was looking for it. So, Larchmont, New York, August 28th, 1923. He breaks into a train station. Panzram had an axe, but there was a cop who was on the beat, and this cop manages to knock him unconscious. So he's arrested, charged with burglary, and he
Okay.
gets 5 years for that.
Okay, so
Five
just so
years at
people know,
16.
the reason you would break into a train station is a couple of things. One, there's probably a little bit of cash for from ticket sales. Plus, there's luggage oftentimes because people would ship parcels and luggage on the trains from one place to another. In fact, that's, that whole Birmingham thing with the bodies in the luggage. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is an example of
Oh
not so
yeah.
good stuff shipped by luggage. But oftentimes, yeah, people would send trunks full of stuff from one city to another. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, so
Oh,
there would have
absolutely.
been a lot to pilfer in a train station.
Yeah. In the 1920s too, when that is literally the main way that people would, travel long distances.
Yep.
Um, But yeah, he does the 5 years at Sing Sing under the alias John Leary. And from there, when they realized how infamous this guy is, they moved him to Clinton Correctional Facility, which is upstate in Dannemora, New York.
Okay.
Um, Dannemora, according to a historian, was, quote, one of the most repressive penal institutions in America. Um, it's hundreds of miles from the nearest city, and it was often known as the last stop for prisoners in New York. Panzram, though, says, I was there only a few months when I made a time bomb and tried to burn down the shop. Again. So,
There's just no slowing this guy down. I mean,
uh,
he's a horrible, horrible person, but he's got a little bit of style to him.
oh, yeah. Oh, and he's got bravado, too.
Yeah.
And get this, after the 6 months that he was in there, he attempts an escape by literally scaling the 30-foot concrete wall
Wow.
using a ladder fashioned from roofing supplies, mostly rope. It broke under his weight. He fell 30 feet to the concrete below, broke his ankles and his neck, and, quote, fractured my spine. Um, 5 days into the infirmary, back to the cell.
Wow.
And they said that the guards and prisoners still really admire that to his day, that he had the balls to climb a 30-foot wall
Yeah.
with basically nothing. So, um, yeah. Uh,
Jesus.
he says, oh, another quote, I used to spend all my time figuring out how I could murder the most people with the least harm or expense to myself. I'm writing it down with a fervent wish that someone may see it and make good use of it to
Oh.
decimate some of the excess population of the world.
Oh.
Yeah,
Man.
amen. He had a scheme that he was thinking about that involved a train. And what he was going to do was fix a large bomb at the top that would be triggered when it would hit the inside of a tunnel when it would scrape it.
Yeah.
Um,
Because there's not a lot of clearance.
yeah,
There's
oh yeah,
very little clearance between the top of the car and the bottom of the tunnel. So it wouldn't have to be all that big.
oh yeah. But he wasn't done either with that. He goes on to say the explosion would burst some other containers full of formaldehyde and other gas.
Whoa.
I would be armed at the rear entrance of the tunnel to shoot down anyone else. And I don't know how he made this leap, but he somehow thought that he would get millions of dollars from it.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where the payoff on that would come from.
Me either. And with the millions of dollars there, he wanted to finance a war between England and the United States. Not even kidding.
On whose side?
He just wanted to see the world burn and bodies pile up.
Yeah.
Amen. Oh, and my note right under that was literally, then why didn't you, pussy?
Well, here's the thing. I this is one of those examples of a person who's very cunning but not very smart.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dude,
Uh,
he has a
like
certain
millions of dollars are gonna, you can go to a government even 100 years ago and say, I've got millions of dollars. Let's start a war, and they're gonna be like, that's not even like the cost of shoes for our army.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I don't know where he came up with that totally at all, but Summer of 1928, he's released from Dannemora and he makes his way to Philadelphia. He sexually assaults and murders a 12-year-old paperboy there named Alexander Uzazel, Uszaelle. Um, and Panzram says at this point that he was intent on, quote, finding new ways to annoy and punish my enemies, and everybody was my enemy.
Mm.
Then to Baltimore, where he gets into a few other assaults and robberies. And he said this too, which is another bit of introspection, I thought. Quote, all of my life, I've been trying to figure out just what ails me and why. It's too late for the remedy, and why it's too late for the remedy. All I want to find out is the reason why I am what I am and why I act the way I do. I've been puzzled all my life about this.
Yeah, see, this is the kind of thing that gets me thinking he's not an actual sociopath. He might be psychotic, but I don't think he's a sociopath
Hmm.
because
That's a good point.
sociopaths are rarely introspective. In
Oh
fact,
yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
think I've ever heard of it being the case.
yeah, me neither until Panzram. But maybe he isn't one. Maybe he has something more like a personality disorder.
Right? Yeah,
Um,
that's something along those lines because yeah, sociopaths are just like, yeah, this is me. I'm cool. Everybody else is weird.
wow. But yeah, it was shortly after that in Baltimore that they caught him, and they shipped him actually back to Leavenworth. Um, and for
Oh,
some
yay.
reason, they put him they put him in there under the name Panzram, probably a clerical error. But oddly enough, Machine Gun Kelly was there at the same time
Oh, no kidding.
as a clerk, and Panzram basically from day one says, "Don't fuck with me." He's assigned to laundry, and he's supervised by a civilian named Warnicki. Um, and he had, interestingly, at Leavenworth around this time, he had more, what's the word I'm looking for, privileges than at the other prisons because it was federal, and they started reforming all that.
Okay.
And inmates could do mail. So Henry Lesser, he continued the correspondence with Panzram under the name Henry James because he knew they'd be screening it.
Ah,
And at the same time, there was an inmate there by the name of Wharton who was doing a stretch for fraud, and he claimed that Warnicki liked to torment people, especially Panzram, because of, quote, his moral habits, basically getting picked on for his homosexuality, is the way I would take that.
sure.
Um,
But how
but
is that?
Wharton,
Even then, that wasn't, couldn't possibly have been a unique thing in prison.
oh, I wouldn't think so. But Panzram, he ended up beating this guy Warnicki to death with an iron bar in the laundry room. So, and that was only after, though, Panzram trying to get a job change and petitioning the Bureau of Prisons to basically get me away from this guy, Warnicki.
Wow.
Um, let's see, October 31st, 1929, Panzram's letter notes that the torture stopped. And he said, quote, had I been treated this way from the beginning, I would have turned out better. Um, oh, yeah, and another interesting inmate who was in Leavenworth at that time, the future Birdman of Alcatraz, Robert Stroud.
Oh.
Yep. And Stroud actually gave Panzram a chapter in his book. Oh, I didn't. Looking Outward is the name of Stroud's book. And then the guy that I mentioned, Wharton, has a book called The House of Whispering Hate,
Hmm.
both about Leavenworth and Alcatraz for Stroud. And those will come back to be a little um, pertinent as we get further. But yeah, Stroud says of Panzram, as he got to know him, that he would vary his victim tally from 1 to 45. So, not totally sure how much we can trust him again.
Wow.
But, and basically, what he was telling the inmates, what he would do, the boys would catch trains with him. He would rape, strangle, and dump them along the train's outward route. And Stroud goes on to say in his book, too, that it was obvious, that's his words, the stories were pure fiction.
Hmm.
Um,
Whose stories?
yeah, well, Panzram's, but yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't believing any of it. But
Yeah, but yeah, but yeah, but
uh, let's see, oh, at the time, a federal jury actually votes to hang Panzram. And that is despite capital punishment being illegal in Kansas.
really.
Yeah. And an anti death penalty group was making a decent amount of headway intervening for Panzram. That is, until he wrote them a letter basically saying fuck off. So
Huh. So what are they going to do if they can't hang somebody in Kansas? Move them?
it's true. Or keep him behind bars. But yeah, at any rate, when he told the group to leave him alone, they did. But oh, and this it was his verbiage for it to the death penalty people. Quote: "I wish you all had one neck, and I had my hands around it."
The ones who wanted to kill him or the ones who wanted to stop him from being killed?
The anti-death penalty
The
people.
anti-death penalty. So,
Yeah,
I'll kill you for not wanting to kill me.
yeah, basically. Um, and Panzram actually, he was Kansas's first hanging since 1870. Um, Now, June 5th, 1930 was the date of the execution. And Panzram, he sees on the gallows that they built in the back, which we actually had a picture of,
Yeah.
that there were two chaplains standing. And he says, if you don't run those Bible backs out, you're going to have one hell of a time getting me out of this cell.
Hmm. Right, because they always want to have some sort of religious leader accompany the condemned.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but it pissed him off quite a bit with that. But the Wharton in the House of Whispering Hate
What
called
great title, by the
Panzram.
way. Great title for
Oh
any
yeah,
book. You just
I
by
thought so
itself.
too.
Yeah.
He called Panzram in his book a quote, but bull on a leash through all of that.
Yeah.
And what's the first thing that he does when he's led out to the gallows? He spits in the face of the captain of the guard.
you just you just can't stop this guy from doing
Uh,
shit, man.
oh yeah, well here's the quote that he gave to the hangman. He said, "Hurry up, you Hoosier bastard! I could kill a dozen more while you're fooling around." So yeah, Um, I don't know where he got Hoosier at though. He wasn't in Indiana.
Yeah, that's um again not necessarily the brightest bulb. Maybe the
Yeah,
guy was from Indiana though. Maybe he knew him.
it could be. But yeah, and then he went on to say before they hung him, I don't want any Bible backed hypocrites at my funeral. Of course, we already knew that one, Carl.
Right?
But yeah, and they hung him. And Lesser, in the meantime, from there to about 1970, spent 40 years trying to get all the info that he had from Panzram published. About 40,000 words is what he wrote. Um,
Wow. That's a, that's like half a novel, right? Or almost a novel. Well, the
oh, yeah.
National Novel Writing Month goal, your target is 50,000 words. Um,
Oh, wow.
so it's close to novel length.
And a good majority of it is digitized and free through San Diego State, which I will go ahead and put that link on our Facebook page for people.
Cool.
So people can read more of Panzram in his own words. And I'll also go ahead and put the YouTube video of the interview with Henry Lesser that they did in 1979, which is pretty interesting. About 4 years before he died. So I'll put that one up as well. Another quote from him on criminology psychology. Every child has some criminal tendencies. It is your place to fix those while they are young and their minds are forming. When they reach the age of reason, it will be natural for them it will be natural for them to lead upright and honorable lives. That way, you will stop crime at its source.
Yeah. Um, I mean, not counting the mentally ill and sociopaths, but yes, it would go a long ways.
Hmm. Yeah,
Well, I mean,
absolutely.
even sociopaths. I mean, let's face it, most sociopaths aren't even criminals. So it that does have an effect.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, and most definitely. I think it's really the core, too, with so much crime. Oh, and I forgot that other interesting fact. You want to know what happened to his body?
It was hung, drawn, and quartered and sent to the four corners of the kingdom. Oh wait,
He
that was England.
he bequeathed his carcass to the city dog catcher in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, to be used as dog meat.
What?
Literally, that's what he did.
Did they agree to do that?
That part I didn't look for, but
Because
that's what he tried to do with his will.
Because, I mean, you can say things in your will. That doesn't mean people are actually going to carry them out.
Yeah,
Especially
that's a good question whether they did that. I know
because
there's a headstone.
I could see all kinds of people going, "Oh hell no, we're not doing that," including the dog catcher.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know there's a headstone for him, but I'm not sure if his body's in there or not. So that is a great question. And like I said, I mean, the guy had bravado.
So one of the quotes that's going around in the slideshow in one of his handwritten notes was where he expressed regret for harming animals,
Hmm.
but not for hurting people. He wanted to hurt more people, but he regretted harming animals.
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
I think that is also an indicator that he was not a sociopath because sociopaths don't care for animals any more than they care for people.
That's very true. And that is totally true.
In fact, I can uh, one of the letters anyway.
He's quite the
Ah,
interesting
there it
character.
is. I'm sorry for only two things.
Uh-huh.
These two things are I am sorry that I have mistreated some few animals in my lifetime, and I am sorry that I am unable to murder the whole damn human race.
Yep. Yep, he did say that. He's definitely one of the more interesting ones that I would wager most people haven't heard about.
Uh, Definitely very interesting guy.
Hmm.
Quite a um, I don't know. He's a lot more faceted than a lot of them.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
he really is.
he's not an especially bright person, smart, intelligence wise, but he's clever and cunning and witty
Hmm.
for
Oh,
a murderer.
absolutely. He is, and that he knew how to make people laugh at certain junctures there. Very macabre stuff too.
Yeah.
Uh, oh, and another thing I might post on our Facebook page. People should go to Amazon Prime. Look for Carl Panzram, The Spirit of Hatred and Vengeance. It's a documentary by a filmmaker named John Borowski, who does great work.
Okay.
He also did a documentary on Albert Fish in
Oh,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I saw that one.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh,
Which
fish,
Fish
man.
would have been Panzram's contemporary.
Yeah, not a good time. There was a
No.
there was a lot of bad shit happening in the 20s and 30s.
Yep.
People who
Yep.
think that, serial killers are a late 20th century phenomena just don't know what the hell they're talking about.
No, they really don't. They absolutely don't. We had plenty of them around this time. But yeah, that was, I think, all I have on him.
Okay, well, that's a lot. That's interesting guy. I hadn't heard of him before either. So, good stuff.
Yeah, the first Minnesota killer we do. I had been looking for one from there. Of course, I didn't count on him sharing a birthday with me either, but
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
uh,
All right, well,
yep,
thanks again.
yep, my pleasure.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.